everyone, it's just 1 minute to go. We're just waiting until maybe just shortly after 12 o'clock and then we'll get underway. So just keep yourselves occupied for a short bit and we'll be right with you. Maybe you could mute while we're waiting because there's no point. Hey everyone, we'll just wait 1 more minute before we get underway. Okay, everyone, it's 1 minute after 12 o'clock, and as promised, we'll get underway now, if that's okay with our, just checking in with the room here. Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to mute everybody on this call so that there is no interruptions from those who are maybe eating lunch or busy with other things. So you're all muted now. My name is Pat Atherton. I work for the BC Support Unit, and I'm here with my colleagues Stirling Bryan, who is the Scientific Director for the BC Support Unit, and Alison Hoens, who is the Knowledge Translation Specialist for the Methods Cluster at the BC Support Unit. This webinar is part of a series being offered by the BC Support Unit, and today is looking specifically at the Methods Clusters. But before we get underway, I'd just like to acknowledge the territory from which we are delivering this webinar, that being Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh. We acknowledge that we are on traditional unceded territory. And with that, I would like to turn the microphone and presentation over to Stirling. So I'm just going to ask Scott if you wouldn't mind sharing the document. And Stirling, thank you very much for offering to present today's webinar on methods clusters.
Good, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining us for a lunchtime webinar. So I'm doing it jointly with Alison Hoens, who is, as Pat indicated, our Methods Cluster Knowledge Translation Specialist. So Alison has been overseeing and facilitating the development of the Methods Clusters at the BC Support Unit. So we will have an opportunity for some questions at the end. So if you have questions, then please feel free to indicate those in the chat box. I think, is that what we're going to use?
Yes, please.
But we'll run through our slides, and sorry, I'm just trying to. Anyway, that's fine. We can do that. Good. So we're going to talk about the methods clusters, a deeper dive. So there's a prize for anyone who can recognize the diver in our picture, but only joking, it's not anyone that we know anyway. It's certainly not me. So we're going to talk about what are the methods clusters. We're going to talk about why we have those methods clusters, what are we doing with those clusters, and how is that happening. And actually, like, the emphasis for the webinar today is more on that how piece. So how are we taking forward this notion of methods clusters as part of the BC support unit? And then one of the things that we want to encourage is for people to get involved. And so the question is how to do that, and we'll try and address that as well. Good. So just as a background piece for those who haven't seen this before or just need a refresher, so the BC Support Unit is an initiative that's part of the strategy for patient-oriented research. So the webcam, it's okay, so sorry you can't see us at the moment. Apparently our webcam has died. Hopefully you can hear us. Probably a benefit that you can't see us, but so apologies for that. So the BC Support Unit is part of Canada's strategy for patient-oriented research, and it's one of the infrastructure pieces. So that we've got national networks, we've got other parts that are part of the strategy that is being led by CIHR, of course. So the BC Support Unit is the infrastructure within BC to try and promote and build. So our first goal is around building capacity to conduct and implement high-quality patient-oriented research. So we're trying to build capacity. The second is to increase the quality and the impact of patient-oriented research in BC. And the third, if we can just remove that, that would be really helpful, is to ensure ongoing support for patient-oriented research in all regions of BC. So what we're talking about today is the high quality and improving or increasing the quality of patient-oriented research. So that's one of the areas where the methods clusters in particular are, sorry, we're just having some technical challenges here. So if I haven't got a slide, yeah, there we are, okay. We're trying to increase the quality of patient-oriented research, and so that's one of the particular areas of focus for the methods clusters. One of the things that we're trying to do is increase that quality piece. Okay, if I press this, it doesn't change anything. So how do I? Okay. Okay, so two ways in which the BC Support Unit is trying to support patient-oriented research, and as a way of just trying to be clear on the role for the methods clusters. So we've got a piece around what we call doing and studying. So the doing of the patient-oriented research is then, I think I need to, so shall I have that? Okay. The doing part is around service delivery. So if you're a health researcher, a patient, a stakeholder as part of a research team, and you're taking forward a research project, and you want to get support from the support unit to enhance the patient-oriented nature of your research project, then you would approach us through our inquiry form. And we would provide support to you, your research team. Say, for example, it might be in relation to patient engagement. So how do you effectively engage patients in your, as part of your research team, or it might be from a methods point of view or whatever. If you're taking forward that applied research project, then that would be the doing side of it, and we would provide support to you through our inquiry form. The second aspect is to do with the studying. And this is where the methods clusters come in. And this is just to share an example of a piece of work that was done looking specifically at patient engagement in research, a systematic review. And one of the things that review found was the paucity of evidence upon which to base selection of methods to conduct patient engagement in health research.
Sorry, I'm just going to mute everyone again because we've got some background noise. One moment, please. One moment, bear with me. Go ahead.
Okay. So the methods, the reason that we've got, one of the reasons why we have methods clusters is because we recognize that we have a paucity of evidence upon which to base selection of methods to conduct patient-oriented research. So this would be an example in the case of patient engagement. So the question is, how should I most effectively and most cost-effectively engage patients in the health research enterprise? And a systematic review has revealed that actually we have very little evidence upon which to base those decisions at this point. So this isn't questioning whether we should do patient engagement. This is saying what we need to do is make sure that we do that in a respectful, effective, and cost-effective way. And in order to achieve that, we need a stronger evidence base. And so the methods clusters are partly trying to deal with that question of how we can actually then progress and take forward the evidence base, strengthen the evidence base for the conduct of patient-oriented research. And so this is the methods cluster piece. We're looking at the procedure of the process, so the how and not the what. So we're wanting to answer the how can we effectively engage patients in health research. Maybe if you're just joining, you could mute. We're getting some background noise, so that would be very helpful.
And I'll just make sure we're all muted. Bear with me one moment, please. Okay, Stirling.
Okay. Good. So the studying of methods used in patient-oriented research is what the methods clusters are about. So we're on the studying side. And how to access this, then if you want to get engaged, as we'll indicate later, then you can contact one of the cluster leads or our KT specialist, Alison Hoens. And clearly what we recognize and think is very important is that these aren't separate activities. We're not having a part of the support units dealing with the doing and a part that's dealing with the studying. We recognize the importance of overlap. We actually want what we study in the methods clusters to inform the applied research work that we support. And similarly, we want the applied research work to give us ideas and give us areas of focus for studying of methods as well. So it's an integrated approach to thinking about this challenge. Okay, so I'm going to pass over now to Alison Hoens, who will present the next series of slides, and then I'll come back later on.
Thank you, Stirling, and thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit more about, specifically, we're going to be talking about the rest of this webinar is about the processes in order to launch and then identify the projects that move forward within the methods clusters. So what you see at the top of this graphic here, where it says goal and then it says build capacities, these are the three overall goals of the support unit, which Stirling has already articulated. What you see below that is the methods cluster's mandate and the goals of the methods clusters in specific. So the mandate is to advance the evidence base of the scientific methods used within the context of patient-oriented research by fostering a community of methodologists with relevant stakeholders to engage in discussions and collaboratively undertake projects. Now, I know that's a mouthful, there's a lot of words there, but essentially this is about not just methods, but rather than the traditional way of undertaking research, which tends to be more of a competitive process in submitting proposals and the best projects move forward, etc. This is about bringing together methodologists in each of the relevant areas of research with their stakeholders to collectively identify and then collectively undertake projects that are going to contribute to advancing the science in methods. So there's three specific goals for the methods clusters. First is to advance the area of science. Second is to promote the use of the knowledge which is generated. So as Stirling just said in the last slide, where there's the overlap between the doing and the studying, the knowledge generated by each cluster would then be used by the stakeholders that are engaged with the support unit. And then to promote the field of research itself. So we currently have 5 methods clusters. The first methods cluster that was launched was Knowledge Translation and Implementation Science at the beginning of the year. And then Data Science and Health Informatics, Real-World Clinical Trials, Health Economics, and Simulation Modeling were all launched in April. Patient Engagement was launched in September. And we're currently in the process of identifying the lead for patient-centered measurement. So let's go into a little bit more about how this process for identifying these leads was undertaken. There was an open call for leads of each cluster. This was distributed province-wide. And then there was a selection panel which included 2 external reviewers. So when applications were submitted for leadership of the clusters, the panel went through those applications, and the intent was to ensure regional distribution and also for ensuring caliber of all the candidates. So these are how our leads were identified. Once the leads were identified, we began the process of developing the cluster and identifying the projects. And that involved a series of steps. The first step was key informant consultation and an expression of interest and a survey. Now what that looked like is in order to identify who the key informants were, we had a widespread call that went out through our newsletter, through our email distribution. We asked it to go out through each of the research institutions and organizations and health authorities. We also had targeted calls to people who are publishing in BC in each of the respected areas. And then we asked for snowballing. So please, we said, if you know of any relevant individuals, please let them know about this. And so we had our initial consultations by phone, one-on-one meetings, etc. And then through the survey process, we asked people not only to express their interest in the cluster, but also to help us to identify what the current strengths and the current gaps were for those particular areas of research specific to methods. This helped us to shape the next part of our process, which was the visioning workshop. In the visioning workshop, we ensured there was a deliberate effort to make sure that we had representatives who were patient partners, researchers, decision makers, and clinicians. And we really were very purposeful to ensure that there was representation by region, level of expertise, etc. However, we know that because not everybody could attend in person in Vancouver, we ensured that there was a way for people who couldn't attend the visioning workshops or the planning events to have an opportunity to hear what was shared at those workshops in follow-up webinars. We also did a post-workshop survey where we asked for feedback. We reflected back what we had learned from the workshops and asked people to validate that what we had understood was what they had also understood. So in the follow-up webinar, for those that were unable to attend the visioning event, we went through a summary of what was presented in the visioning event. And then we also invited people who hadn't been able to engage with either of those for one-on-one. So every 2 weeks, there's a newsletter that is published by the support unit, and we invite people to provide their input and to ask questions. The next thing then was to put these together into a report on stakeholder consultation. So this is the stakeholder consultation report for the Knowledge Translation and Implementation Science Methods Cluster, and this is freely available on the KTIS, the Knowledge Translation and Implementation Science Methods Cluster webpage. So a full report of everything that was discussed and what analysis occurred is available within this report. So we then collated all of the data from the consultations prior to the workshop, during the workshop, from the survey pre and post, and from the webinars and one-on-one discussions. We analyzed all that data to identify themes that were most prevalent through those discussions. We then took those themes back to our stakeholders and said, is this a fair representation of what your experience was in your discussions with us? We then also, in addition to validating those themes, ideas for potential projects were proposed by the different stakeholder groups, by patients, by researchers, by methodologists, by decision makers, etc. And so we took those back to our stakeholders with some criteria and asked them to say, what are your thoughts about these project ideas? Are these the ones that you heard? Are we missing any? Are there any additional ones that you would like us to add? And then a process of prioritizing those projects. Because it's not going to be feasible to undertake 20 or 25 projects, there needed to be a process to identify which ones were most feasible and most relevant for the cluster, most pressing for the cluster to undertake. So how those criteria included these number of considerations. Did they align with CIHR, patient-oriented research criteria? Do they have buy-in from stakeholders? Could they produce applicable results? Would they fulfill the training objectives of the support unit? Was the required budget going to be feasible? Was there a possibility of collaboration between the clusters on the projects? And then there were some specific cluster-specific criteria. And then finally, once there was validation from our stakeholders regarding the themes and the possible project ideas, we then put a call out to open call as well as to the stakeholders who had been engaged through the previous steps in the process to ask, hands up, who would like to lead one of these projects? Who would like to collaborate on these projects? And we were specifically looking for provincial distribution of these. And then who would like to be kept informed of these projects, but not necessarily lead or collaborate on them. So I'm going to be passing the rest of the presentation over to Stirling now, who will outline what happens once those projects have been identified.
Great. Thanks very much, Alison. So hopefully you're getting the impression that we're going through a thoughtful, considered process for getting to the point where we're actually going to be taking some projects forward. I think this is a really exciting sort of stage for us to arrive at, where we actually have the opportunity, once we've identified the gaps that we think exist in terms of methods for patient-oriented research under the headers of knowledge translation, implementation science, health economics, and simulation modeling, etc. Under the headers for the clusters, we now have the opportunity to try and fill some of those gaps. We actually, like within in a BC context, can take forward some projects, and we have leadership for projects emerging in the context of knowledge translation and implementation science, given that that was the first cluster that we were able to launch. So I'm just going to talk through a little bit the process for taking forward the projects. That this is a process that we're rolling out at the moment. It's not something that's completely set in stone in every aspect, but in a general sense, this is now what we've agreed that we will try and do to move things forward. So the project proposals, as Alison indicated at the end of the last slide, we will have leadership identified and project teams identified for each of the projects. And then we'll ask the leadership and the team to prepare a proposal and develop a proposal for the project that they wish to move forward with. And we're using a template that's similar to a CIHR grant application, but we're not viewing it as a grant application. This isn't a competitive process. We've actually been through a process of identifying this as a priority topic and having an open process by which people can engage in the project as a team member. So we want to move this forward, but we also want to make sure that we're moving forward in a way that's going to deliver a high quality piece of work, obviously. So we want to have a proposal prepared, and we're going to use a CIHR, or at least a modified CIHR template for the description of that project. And then that's going to get reviewed. So it'll be reviewed, obviously, internally, but we're also going to have 2 or 3 external people that we recruit to help us with that review process. And we're calling it a review in inverted commas, I would say, because it's not entirely a summative review of the proposal that's going to say go forward or not, because we've actually identified this as a priority area that we do want to move forward with. So the review, in inverted commas, from my perspective, is more on a formative level than a summative level, where we're actually wanting to identify strengths, but also identify areas that potentially could be improved or strengthened further through that review process. So it would be more of an iterative process that ensures that we're going to go forward with a piece of work that really is going to deliver and deliver well on the gap that's been identified. There'll be then refinements of the project proposal, and that will be incorporated into a work plan. So every aspect of what we do in the support unit is associated with a work plan, and so we will have a work plan for the project that will be developed following the external review process, and then that has to obviously go through approval within the support unit for a budget to be attached to that. But that's the process that we'll go through. And then, the project will commence. We're not at this stage yet with anything that we're taking forward, so this is what we're now looking forward to, and we will be at the point, hopefully reasonably early in the new year, to be moving forward with some projects in the knowledge translation and implementation science cluster. And then the project team will receive ongoing support, but there will be regular reporting requirements. So it's going to be something that we work collaboratively with that project team. It's not going to be just here's the funding, and then come back in 3 years' time to tell us how it went. We actually want to work collaboratively and in a supportive way with that research, with the research team. Okay, so what we're trying to do is obviously achieve scientific excellence, but in a collaborative way. So I often use the phrase that high-quality health research is a team sport, and I firmly believe that. So it very much is a collaboration that we're trying to build. Now, this is a collaboration on methods projects. So obviously, we've got to think long and hard about how we engage other stakeholders in this team in an appropriate way. We don't want to waste people's time. We don't want to ignore and not listen to voices that would be important voices to hear. But getting that balance right is something that we've got to work through with these methods cluster projects, because the focus is on developing methodology and or at least developing methods that within a broader area of methodology. So we do want to do this collaboratively, and we've tried to develop a process that allows for folks within DC who have a stake in this topic to be able to step forward and engage either in a leadership way on a project or in a collaborative way as a member of the research team. So hopefully we're going to be delivering on excellence in terms of the science that we take forward. So I think the take-home messages, as I've just said, is about collaboration again. So we're trying to address the important questions about methods within the areas of methodology where we have clusters. So we are trying to identify what those important gaps are and how we move forward with projects to fill those gaps, and doing that in a very collaborative way. So moving now to how you can get involved, or what you can do to both be informed and to get engaged. And of course, it may be that you're thinking, well, it's nice to know that this is going on, but I'm not sure that I want to be part of this. In which case, then how to be informed is what we can share. But it may be, and hopefully some of you want to think this is an exciting opportunity, and you want to get more fully engaged in this, then we want to share the process through which we can achieve that as well. Okay, so in terms of involvement, so as I say, we're now moving hopefully to a stage where we're going to be focusing on project-specific involvement, and that's the primary sort of route through which others can get involved with the methods clusters at this point, is through individual projects. So, I mean, with knowledge translation and implementation science, we're further down the road, but with all of the other clusters, then there would be an opportunity, and will be, calls for people who want to express a desire to be involved in leading a project. Once that list of projects is becoming clearer, people might want to collaborate or just be kept informed. We are going to have patient partner involvement in this, and we have had that from the very beginning. So all of our visioning workshops or planning events that we've had for the clusters so far, they've all had patient partner involvement, people actually attending the day-long workshops to share their perspectives and thoughts, and that will continue into the project phases. We definitely, of course, wish to have true patients partnering on these projects, as well as other stakeholders. So we're looking for clinical engagement as well as policy and stakeholder engagement. Options for how to keep up to date with latest developments. So if it's more about just keeping informed of this, then signing up for our newsletter would be a way to do that. And we have a specific methods clusters corner in the newsletter that comes out every second week. And of course, you can be added. We also have distribution lists that are specific to particular clusters, and just dropping Alison a note to say that you'd like to be added to that distribution list would be the way to achieve that. So the mailing list, if you go to our website, you can join our mailing list under the News and Events tab, and click on the Join the Mailing List button. If you want to find out more about the methods clusters, then we have the dedicated methods cluster page on our website, and then we have sub-pages to do with each of the clusters that we have up and running at the moment, so the 5 clusters that are active at this point, and then that will be joined by the 6th cluster, which will launch early in the new year on patient-centered measurement.
I am. Is Maggie done?
Maggie, I'm not sure is necessarily done. Sorry, if you could just mute your call, whoever's talking at the moment, that would be very helpful. Okay, and Yeah, that's all we wanted to share at this point. So thank you for your attention. Hopefully that's given you information that's going to be useful in helping you judge whether you wish to engage, and if you do, at what level you wish to engage in the in our methods clusters here at the support unit. We'll stop at that point and then open it up for questions and any comments that you have.
Maybe while we're waiting for questions, either by voice or by chat, I might just share that on the Real World Clinical Trials webpage, we currently have all the themes and potential project ideas posted. And there is an open call, whether you've participated in Real World Clinical Trials consultations yet or not. You're welcome to view those themes and project ideas and provide us with feedback and let us know if you're interested in any of the particular projects. The other clusters, we haven't got on the website, those themes and projects, because we're in consultation with potential leadership for those projects at the moment. So when that's possible, we will also be sharing those. And we do have links, as we said, in our newsletter every 2 weeks for further information on those areas. So are there any questions?
I don't think they heard you. Oh.
You unmuted the mic, so if you have questions that you'd like to ask via your voice, you're welcome to, or you can use that chat function up in the top right-hand area of your screen. And where I see that we've got some background noise, I am going to mute folks.
Oh.
But I can put my headphones on if this is the background noises.
Anybody have any questions? Questions by voice, questions by the chat function up in the top right-hand area. We've got one from Rahul. Just open this up. This question is, thank you. How many people tend to be in one cluster, and will these slides be available on your website?
I can address that question. Thank you, Rahul. The number of people in a cluster, there's no formal membership. There's no test that one has to undertake to be a member of a cluster. So the membership is variable. It's based upon interest. People who have passion and time to contribute are welcome to do so in whatever way feels most feasible for them. With regards to are these slides going to be available, yes, we will have a recording of this session with the slides available on the recording side of our webpage. And we were also going to be putting this together as a slideshow of a few moments, the highlight moments on the website for people who finding an hour is more challenging.
Great, thanks, Alison. We've got another question. How many projects are posted now, and can a methods cluster decide to do more than one project? And can you give an example of one of the projects? So 3 questions, please.
Okay, thank you for the question, Susan. So if you click on the Real World Clinical Trials webpage, you will see that at this stage for that cluster, I think that, there's a number of themes that have been identified with potential project ideas for each theme there. I don't actually have a number, a count for that, Susan. So sorry, I cannot provide that. Realistically, we're probably looking, depending on budget, somewhere between 4 and 6, and that number is going to have to be flexible. But approximately between 4 and 6 projects per cluster, and some projects will cross over clusters. They'll be relevant to other clusters.
So just maybe I can give, because I've
Yeah.
got it up in front of me, so I can just give you an example of a topic that's listed under real-world clinical trials. So real-world clinical trials is sometimes known as pragmatic trials. It's about trying to do a high-quality clinical trial research in a routine delivery setting. So some of the challenges that exist we're going to specifically take forward on that cluster. So these are just some of the themes. Say, for example, improving recruitment and the consenting processes in real-world settings for admission into a clinical trial is one of the things that we're thinking about there, so that we can ensure that we get that broader recruitment into clinical trials, which is one of the key characteristics of defining a pragmatic trial compared to more of a regulatory clinical trial. So that would be an example. But yeah, we're certainly going to try and go forward with a number of projects, 4, 5 within each cluster.
Thanks, Stirling. We have another question. Hi, I'm a patient partner with the PHCRN, which I believe is Primary Healthcare Research Network. And I'm also working with qualitative and quantitative data. How can I contribute? Stirling or Alison?
So I think that the main, I guess initially it's about deciding which cluster or which clusters are the areas of particular interest for you. So, obviously the patient engagement might be one to keep an eye out for, which we're moving forward with in the new year. And we have our visioning events scheduled for
February 20th.
Yeah.
You heard it first here, February 20th.
So that would definitely be something to make sure is on your radar. But if it's not patient engagement that you're particularly interested in, but you wish to be a patient partner in one of the other clusters, then that's something that we would welcome you contributing to in some way, and we'll you need to make contact with Alison in order to move that forward.
And just a little further detail on that, the patient engagement methods cluster, the expression of interest in the survey for the visioning workshop was just sent out yesterday. So there's a link to it on our website. It's in today's newsletter. Please feel free to complete that expression of interest and the survey, whether you're a researcher, a patient partner, etc. In addition to that, if you're interested in participating in any of the projects, please do sign up for our mailing list and look at the methods cluster corner of the newsletter. And as those projects are developed, we will be keen to have your involvement. So thank you for your question, Regina.
Thanks, Stirling and Alison. We have a question from Leslie Bryant in Kelowna. Leslie, you've typed your question in chat, and I know you also raised your hand. So I'm wondering if you want to pose your question by voice, and we can talk about it.
Sure. I wasn't sure if it's an offline question or not. Hi, guys.
Leslie, would you mind introducing yourself to the folks who are tuned in and don't know who you are?
Sure. Who doesn't know who I am? No, I'm just kidding. I'm Leslie Bryan. I'm a regional practice lead for research and knowledge translation specific for Indigenous populations, graciously funded by the BC Support Unit through the internal region hub. Is that good? Okay. And being, mono-focused around Indigenous methodologies, I'm wondering out loud with you all if there's opportunity to explore Indigenous methodology within some of the other hubs via some of these potential projects. I'm thinking mainly patient engagement. I did have a conversation last week with them, and I think there's some visioning happening in February that I'll be participating in, but I just thought I would throw it out there given the venue.
Thanks very much, Leslie. So yeah, the projects that we go forward with on patient engagement will be ones that are identified through the visioning event and through the pre-visioning event survey work that the cluster is taking forward. So this definitely is going to be on the agenda, I'm sure, for discussion. I don't want to prejudge the outcome of that, but I would certainly feel that this obviously should be considered seriously and viewed as a potential priority area. I mean, the other piece on the sort of Indigenous health research sort of work of the clusters is that we want to try and ensure that there are some cross-cutting themes, and this would definitely be a cross-cutting theme across the clusters, is actually ensuring that we are taking forward projects that address issues that are specific to conducting Indigenous health research, as well as working with Indigenous health researchers and Indigenous people to ensure that the projects that we go forward with have that lens.
Thanks, Stirling.
Thanks for the question, Leslie, and for the answer, Stirling. Any other questions from those who are still on the call?
Maybe while others are thinking, I'll just go back to the question about how many people tend to be in a cluster. Our distribution list, our stakeholders for most clusters are somewhere around 60 people, and I think it'll be even higher for patient engagement. So sorry I didn't give you a number there, Ravi.
Thanks, Alison. Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Any other questions from the group? Hearing none, seeing none then. Stirling and Alison, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today and putting together this presentation to help all of us understand the methods cluster as they currently exist better. And thanks to everybody who took time to tune in live. We'll also have the recording up on our website as previously mentioned. And that recording will be available very, very soon. Please feel free to share the link with your colleagues so that information about how the clusters are working gets disseminated as broadly as possible. We'll also be promoting the recording via our newsletter and by social media to make sure that everybody who wants to know more about the methods clusters has an opportunity to listen to this presentation asynchronously or via recording. So thank you all very much for your time, and we wish you a very pleasant rest of your Wednesdays or whatever day of the week you happen to be listening to the recording.
And season's greetings.
And season's greetings if you're hearing this around the season. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.